all is fine, but I like to get my eyes on it as well. And we're good to go. All right. So again, welcome everyone. This is our Sunday morning class with Guy Finley. If this is your first time joining us, we broadcast here every Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. So thanks for joining us from wherever you are in the world. And our format is that in just a moment, Guy is going to give about an hour-long talk. We'll take a very short break while I give some announcements, and then we'll go right into part 2 of class, which is an open Q&A dialogue discussion time with all of you. And I will tell you more about that when we get to that point. Altogether, we'll probably run somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours. Depends on how many questions and how much participation we get and how long Guy would like to go. So we'll just play it by ear. If you have any tech issues, you certainly can reach out to us in the question box or chat box, depending on where you're tuning in from. You always can send me an email directly to support@guyfinley.org. You can send an email there anytime, actually, you have questions. Our classes are always recorded and they go up on our channels pretty much right after class so that you can go and watch them again at your leisure. And if you don't know much about our foundation, certainly reach out to us. Go to our website at guyfinley.org and you'll just find tons and tons of helpful material there. So reach out to us and we're always happy to help. Let me just make sure I've got everything ready to go. And I think we're good, Guy. So would you like me to go ahead and start off by reading the title and key lesson?
Yes, please.
All right, here we go. How to bring an end to unhappy feelings that seem endless. And here's the key lesson. All anxious resistance to what might be is the avoidance of what is. All right, Guy, handing it to you, and I'll see you after your talk.
Thanks, Katie. Find my cursor, get my laptop straightened out, and we're good to go. Sometimes when I'm working on material and I want to more or less summarize it with a title or a key lesson, some topic, I realize, especially after these many years of teaching, that when you say something like how to bring an end to the endless feeling of unhappiness, something along those lines, unhappy feelings that seem endless, a lot of people immediately say, well, I'm not, my unhappiness isn't endless. And we're not looking to prove anything here. What we're looking to do is to see whether or not certain things are true of us. And my intention with the material that I will present to you, whatever day or time it may be that you're joining me, is to awaken within you, within all of us, a completely new possibility. That's what the truth has always represented. A possibility that is beyond imagination, because the mind can only imagine what it does from its own past, and the truth is about what is always new. It is unimaginable because it is a world, a light, a kingdom within us that isn't determined, let alone created by what thought, any thought, can do. So with that idea in mind, I just would ask you to see that everyone longs for a happiness that remains in place. Really, when you think about what you do all day long, you're dealing with things that are interfering in your mind's eye with what is your happiness. Because when our unhappiness goes away, so our peace disappears in the same moment. And this feeling of a happiness that we want to stay in place and that we sometimes achieve a happiness, but it's eradicated. It's such a fragile happiness. How about that for a simple set of words? Our happiness, our peace can be disturbed by a single irritation. Somebody can just literally look at me or not respond to a comment I've made, and instantaneously I'm filled with resistance. There can be a fear. I hear something on the news. I look in the mirror. I have a pain I didn't expect. And instantaneously my happiness, my contentment, whatever it was leading up to that moment, is out the window, and suddenly I'm a captive of this feeling that I have, this resistance. The loss of something. The minute that we lose something, we are instantaneously captured by a sense of unhappiness because our happiness was resting in what we had acquired or gained. And if that isn't clear enough, this will be. When that happens, when this fragile happiness is interrupted by an irritation, a fear over the loss of something or the fear of tomorrow, and that peace is just evaporates, what is it that all of us do at that point in time? I'm asking these questions with the hope that somehow or other you will at least work along with me and come up with what it is that we do. What happens at that point when our happiness is suddenly shaken to the core? And the answer is simple. We simply start to imagine some form of opposite to what we see, what we're reacting to, and that we blame as having taken away this peace, this happiness that we had imagined. And clearly it had been imagined or it couldn't have been taken away. Let me give you some examples. I'm at home, and 3 days ago, my boyfriend called me and said, "I'm calling it quits. It's not you, it's me." A day goes by, a shock. Now the next day, 2 days later, I'm lonely. I'm filled with loneliness. And what do we do when suddenly we have this loneliness? This mind goes to work and it starts imagining a new relationship. Well, I'll find a soulmate. That idiot, she wasn't, he wasn't, obviously my soulmate, but he's out there, she's out there somewhere. And then part of that imagination of a new relationship to do what? To deal with the loneliness, the resistance to the negative state we're feeling. Then it expands itself. Well, I have to go someplace, obviously. If I want to not be lonely, I need to go somewhere where I'll meet exciting people. And if I can't meet exciting people, maybe I'll just go someplace that'll be exciting, period. So now the mind, in resistance to its loneliness or sense of isolation, it does what? It starts to imagine something that will allow it to escape that sense of anxiety or pain that it's in. That's the way it works. And as the mind grapples with and comes up with what it imagines, then it begins to identify with the consolation, the pleasure of that which is going to replace the pain. I hope you're following me. Let's say I have regrets. What happens when I find myself, incidentally, not having consciously brought up this regret, but visited by something that stirs in my mind this unhappy moment from some time in my past? What does my mind do? First, it resists the reaction that comes up, and as it resists the reaction, it tries to escape what it says is the reality of the moment. But what is the actual reality of the moment? Is that person, place, problem from 5, 10, 20 years ago? Is that actually the problem? Or is the problem that my mind has brought something up, unbeckoned, and that brings me into an instantaneous reaction in recalling the pain of it, and suddenly I need to find a way to get rid of that pain. So now I spend my time thinking about what to do, coming up with how I'll treat them or fix them or get rid of this. And the next thing I know, one way or the other, I'm now not looking at the pain of the reaction. I'm not resisting the reaction and the state it brought up. Now I'm trying to assist the mind in its deliberation how to get out of this pain and into a new pleasure. It's important that we see this. And the fact that this is a loop that just goes on and on and on is that it doesn't matter, and it never has, what it is that this mind comes up as it feels resistance to a condition, to escape the condition it resists, the unhappiness it resists. It doesn't matter. And you mustn't lie to yourself about this. Eventually, what goes around comes around again. And the very condition that we blame for our unhappiness, we can change it 1,000 times. And then the smallest incident will create some corresponding similar reaction to what was before. Our happiness is obliterated. And now we have to struggle to regain and keep whatever it is that our mind had imagined would rescue us. But we always come to a dead end. If you don't recognize that, there's nothing I'm going to say today or ever that's going to assist you in escaping these feelings of unhappiness that seem endless. I know they don't seem endless when you're eating. I know that the unhappiness doesn't seem endless when you're holding somebody in your embrace. But the minute that person or that situation pulls away, the minute that food is over and now you're filled with regrets for what you ate or how much you ate, whatever the case may be, the unhappiness comes back in a form of judging oneself, in a form of wishing that the moment wasn't the way it is. And the reason that it goes on and on and on, we don't understand. That's the purpose of our talk today. Why does this feeling of unhappiness never seem to go away? Why do I always have someone or something to blame for my stress or my anxiety, regardless how many times I come to the next natural choice to free myself from that conflict? Now, if you really have seen what I'm saying is true, and to some extent you've seen that you don't know what to do, how many times can you plan a trip abroad? How many times can you envision being on a sailboat someplace? How many times can you come up with another kind of food to fill in the empty space in you that none of the other new foods filled? All addictions run this course. We just don't understand what drives them. So I'm going to, as best I can, and I know I don't want this to sound presumptuous. It's not. This material that I'm going to share with you today is as important as any material I've ever shared with anyone, because it's a deeper insight into what drives this dead end, this endless loop, the loop of my anger, the loop of my need to justify myself, the loop of my fear. Why does it always seem to go away and then always come back, so I have to find something else to protect, to defend, or otherwise justify, so at least I have a momentary sense that I put this problem away? Here's where we're going. And look, I'm going to explain this in the simplest terms possible. I'm not saying that your mind is simple. I'm saying that our minds simply don't understand the big picture. And we must start understanding the big picture, that we live in a world where it seems that we struggle with flesh and blood. We don't. We struggle with powers and principalities that we are imbued with and that live themselves through us. All the old myths, the stories about the gods up there and how they use human beings as playthings, all of this alludes to the fact that we as human beings, created in the image of God, in the likeness of the cosmos that God created, in the likeness of the energies that brought that about into existence for us to experience, all of that is what we are, and we know nothing of it, let alone how these principalities, these powers, play themselves out in us and play us until we understand how they work. That's what we're working at. Most of us know Newton's third law. And Newton's third law, don't get nervous, is that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. We've all heard that before. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Now, what has that got to do with feelings that seem endless in terms of their unhappiness, their anger, or their worry? What does Newton's third law, every action, equal and opposite reaction, have to do with this constant reappearance of a sudden resistance to someone or something that has come in and threatened my happiness? And then why, in spite of all the ways I've tried to change the people around me, all the different manners in which I've dealt with these problems, I always find myself having that same unhappiness come around again? Here's the answer, and then we're going to look at it deeply. I trust we get every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. When a rocket ship blasts off, it blasts off because all that force is coming out of the nozzle, and all that force going down is pushing it up. Every action, an equal and opposite reaction. But what we don't understand is that the converse of that law is true as well. What does that mean? It means that for every reaction, there is an equal and opposing action. Let's go through it. For every action, equal and opposite reaction. I get that. But I never thought to myself that the converse of that law is true, that for every reaction that I have, there is an equal and opposing action. Why? Because all forces that we're describing occur always in action-reaction pairs. There's no such thing as a force in one direction without a force in another, and there's no such thing as a reaction in one direction without creating an action in the opposite direction. Oh, please try to follow me. These opposing forces, action, reaction, reaction, action, are simultaneous. They never appear separately. They are simultaneous, equal in magnitude, and always represent opposing directions. That's the nature of this, which means, if you're following me at all, that these forces do not, as we imagine they will. For instance, I come up with this anger. I have this sudden anger, an angry reaction. Have you ever had an angry reaction? When we have an angry reaction, what is it that our mind does? The anger is always a reaction, and the action it takes generates usually some kind of retaliatory action. So when I'm angry, I've seen it. If I act out the reaction of anger, I get anger back from someone else. If I'm afraid and I try to protect myself from that loss, what I get is this need to justify, control, or otherwise manage the things that I'm clinging to. So the reaction of frustration, something is delaying what I want from life, that reaction does what? What does the reaction of frustration generate? It generates impatience. It generates hurried up actions, so that instead of getting through that moment, I'm going to come back and live it again. So action gives rise to reaction. Here's something that acts on me. I can't control what you're going to say. I can't control the kind of person you are. I can't control the insanity of this planet that, by the way, is doing what? Always coming up with some solution to, some reaction to an action that someone or some place or some nation took. So that we're always in a fight with what seems like what needs to be blamed for the resistance we feel. When, if you're following me, resistance is a reaction. And resistance as a reaction gives rise to an action. Reactive actions reinforce the condition we're trying to escape because they're tied together. This is why I believe Christ said this strange thing, resist not evil, he told his disciples. resist not evil. Antithetical, I might add, to Judaic law at the time, which is always saying an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Here comes Christ, says, no, resist not evil. And he actually goes through an iteration. But if you understand what that means, which I'm going to help you explain, I'm going to explain it. I've talked about this in the past before. The original, the Aramaic meaning of those words that Christ spoke, resist not evil, is do not oppose what opposes you. Do not oppose what opposes you. See it with me. I've said something, you're not happy with it. You are immediately opposing, you're having a negative reaction to me. So your resistance triggers in me what? This seeming action, but it's not an action on my part. It is an unconscious resistance to the force that you're exuding. So when I oppose you, it seems to me that that's the solution to the unhappiness in that conflict. But the opposition to you doesn't bring an end to my unhappiness. What it does is it drives the circle of the self that's creating it. So it goes around and round. Resistance binds us by identification to the consciousness that creates conflict. Resistance binds us by identification to the consciousness responsible for the conflict that we feel in that moment. Again, what is the nature of my conflict with any given moment? What is the nature of your conflict, of your unhappiness in any given moment? Simply put, that moment isn't the way it's supposed to be. So I resist any moment that seems to me to be set against me. And I believe that my resistance to whatever it is that seems to be set against me, the way you're treating me, the way what they're not doing, I believe that that resistance is actually not only my resistance, but I require the feeling it gives me in order to start figuring out how to escape you, this, that, or them. But you don't have to have a mind to see that you have never escaped the unhappiness that comes with resisting life. No matter what new reality you come up with to answer that resistance, the reaction that's produced it, it may change your circumstances momentarily, but it doesn't change the momentum of an unconscious nature that will, by necessity, by law, bring about the conditions it's requiring in order to go through the transformation that it's intended to go through. So literally, when we resist an unwanted moment that feels like we're active, when you're resisting a moment, there is nothing active in you. Resistance is the passive reaction to an unwanted moment that you have no control over. And the illusion that you do have control over it is what gets you to identify with what resistance is saying. Well, I'm going to go live someplace else. I'm going to change my whatever it is. So that consciousness, when we identify with what it is resisting, not you, what my own resistance, what it's resisting, it reincarnates that nature. This is the real meaning, incidentally, of what Buddha was talking about when he talked about reincarnation. It simply means we don't recognize yet. Resistance seems to be a force working on our side. Doesn't it? You did this, I resist that. Resistance seems to be a force that I think somehow or other I am bringing up because it's helping me identify the cause of this reaction. But resistance, no matter how you cut it, is a force. Resistance is a force. And when it is projected into the world around us, into our relationships, it ensures under law the appearance of its opposite. Resistance is a force. For every action, equal and opposite reaction. For every reaction, for every form of resistance, a subsequent action that is, for all intents and purposes, evidence back when that person does what? When you resist a person, do they go, oh, thank God you told me that? Or do they say, well, you don't know that about yourself. You're just like me, or you're worse. Or our own inner state will mirror back to us some kind of painful force. Have you ever been attacked by your own inner state? Have your own thoughts and feelings, have you never witnessed them come back at you with a fury? We all have, we just don't understand what's driving it. So that when we understand, resistance does not release us from the action, the person, the problem. Resistance binds us to a level of consciousness that doesn't recognize that what it resists will persist in another form, and that new form will eventually go round and round and round. And instead of escaping the condition, the result of our resistance is the escalation of that conflict. It is the entrenchment of our identity in that situation, and then the repetition and the repetition and the repetition of it, which is why the feelings of unhappiness never go away. They never go away because the consciousness responsible for their appearance keeps recreating the conditions required for that conflict to come up and for us to go through the summary, useless, futile resistance. Ecclesiastes. I never stop being fascinated by the depth of that simple passage where he says, whoever struggles in the field of opposites struggles for nothing. In essence, he goes on to say they are no different than the beasts in the field. And then fascinating, he goes on to say that who struggles in the field of opposites struggles for nothing, and their actions are vanity. How in the name of heaven do we connect all of that? Why are their actions vanity when they struggle in the field of opposites? Because it is vain to believe that you understand that consciousness that tells you you have to struggle with what you're resisting. Because resistance is the only thing we know to turn to, or actually that turns on us and picks us up in unwanted moments. All I can do is resist. That's what the mind is always working on. Something has troubled it. It didn't bring up the goodness, the bounty in the Western world in particular, all that we're given, even those of us who have little. No, that mind will always find something as some condition triggers it, for it to wish it wasn't happening or that it didn't happen. And every time it wishes that whatever happened didn't, or that what happened a long time ago shouldn't have, the instant it does that, what is it doing? It is reacting to a series of images that it has called up. And when it called up those images, you didn't call it up, that nature called those images up, and then that nature looks at the images it has called up, and it says, oh no. And then it resists its own imagination. And it resists its own imagination because it doesn't want the experience of what it initially had imagined. And around it goes. And its vanity is why? Because never is any sense of myself clearer, stronger, more important than when it is that I know what's wrong with you, what's wrong with myself, and what's wrong with this world. My identity is rooted in this relationship between action and reaction, and it doesn't matter which side one takes. Something comes along, it acts on me, it's not how it's supposed to be. Up comes this resistance, never suspecting that I wouldn't resist what is active if there weren't something sitting there passively in me that I didn't expect had been carried over. I couldn't even have suspected it. You know that saying, out of sight is out of mind? We've all heard that. Well, I can guarantee you that out of sight is not out of mind when it comes to all of these conditioned aspects of this unconscious nature that first imagined something that would save it from what it didn't want, became identified with it, and then just it became identified and dependent on it, and then the circumstances changed, doesn't mean that that sense of self, that what I'm dependent on has gone away. No, what I'm depending on simply appears again in the form of resistance to anything that challenges what I'm attached to. It just goes on and on and on. Now, if we can realize in real time, and let me slow down and explain what I mean by that. If we can see, if we can understand, realize in real time, not philosophically, understand not through some kind of applied spirituality, understand in real time not through this belief I have in some divine image, but if I can see in real time that the resistance that comes up in me when you do, they say, it unfolds this way. If I can realize it in real time, that resistance always gives rise to some form of futile subsequent action. What is the futile subsequent action that follows resistance? Trying to change what I blame for it. That's what the futile subsequent action is a force that comes out of me. Resistance comes in. Now it's going to go out. It's going to blame you. It's going to fight with them. It's going to toss and turn with thoughts about how to get rid of the problem that's imagined to begin with. And out of that, what happens? Around and around we go. I'm describing something to you that is unworldly, that one would never even want to investigate if it weren't for living in a world where our usual actions born of resistance simply prove that everything about that resistance was futile, but we didn't see it in the moment. Because resistance comes up with imagining a new action, the new place, the new person I'll be, the new you I'll make of you. And as I imagine that time to come, I identify with it, and my pain disappears. It's replaced. So that resistance and the suffering inherent in it, the demand hidden in it, is replaced by a reality that one day I will know. And then in imagining that reality, I'll one day know I experienced the happiness that has been vested in that time to come. And even when, as I've said 1,000 times, that time to come actually comes, then I'm struggling to control the conditions that I believe control that happiness. And any happiness that requires control isn't happiness at all. Happiness is God-given. It isn't a creation of human beings. If it weren't for the things that we've imagined would make us happy, always the flip side of trying to get away from what has made us unhappy. If we hadn't imagined those things and then identified with them, we wouldn't fight with whatever that comes along and challenges that sense of self. Happiness is the natural outcome of a human being in relationship with the living light that reveals the truth of everything that I've been explaining to you this morning or this afternoon or this evening. Happiness isn't the continuation of something. It's a participation in a constant rebirth, whereby all that was old and clinging and dependent and attached and the source of the resistance that we experience, where it is realized for being the nature that it is. It isn't that it's useless, quite the contrary. But as it is now, our relationship with that unconscious nature is totally useless, and we are used by it. What would happen if, instead of that habitual identification with that negative reaction, oh no, What would happen if we were capable, as we are intended, created to be, to bring those moments, all such moments, into our awareness of the consciousness responsible for that resistance? Follow me. Now my consciousness can't tell the difference between what it wants and what it doesn't want. It doesn't want this, so it wants that. But what it wants soon become what it doesn't want. So that it's always vacillating, but never knows its one unconscious nature in this vacillation that even as it claims victory, produces the victim 10 minutes, 10 years later. If we could see that, and you will, one day, with God as my witness, if you will act as the witness you're intended to, if you'll bring this nature into this light. Yesterday on Insight Timer, I spoke of this unseen, unconscious relationship. The light dwells in the darkness, and the darkness comprehends it not. It speaks of a certain kind of seeming duality, where there is this nature that lives in the dark of itself and doesn't know what it does to itself. Because when something acts on it, all it knows to do is to push back. Never suspecting that every time it pushes back on life that it thinks is pushing it, all it's creating is the next thing that will push back on it. For every action, an equal and opposite reaction. For every negative reaction, the eventuality of a negative experience that consciousness will recreate. It is inescapable. And one day, you might actually see it. How many times have I gotten anxious? How many times have I been impatient? How many times do I find myself endlessly explaining myself, unaware of the pain? It is pain that explains itself, not a conscious human being. But I don't know that it's pain that is driving me to explain myself, because the nature that is caught up doing that explanation is feeling the relief it imagines it will have when someone finally understands what you've been unable to get them to understand, regardless how many times you've explained it. Do you see what I'm leading to? It isn't that this reaction we're having is going to give rise to some incredible new action that by identifying with it and embracing it is going to free us from the opposite. It's recognizing that we live unconsciously in a nature that is in constant conflict with its own content, and that it can't do what it's always trying to do. You can't free yourself. You can't escape yourself. And if I actually understood that, God willing that I see some of what the speaker is describing, if I actually see I can't escape myself, and that's all I try to do. Everyone I blame, every plan for tomorrow, psychologically, all of that becoming is a way in which this nature imagines a time for itself when it won't be experiencing what it doesn't want. When what it doesn't want doesn't exist without what it does. If I see I can't really ever escape myself, what am I brought to? This is where it becomes unimaginable. This is where forever the truth has been called the path of negation. And the reason it's the path of negation, or that's called that way, is because when at last I see I'm not going to escape myself, then every time I get ready to do it, start talking, blaming, hating, reliving, every time that goes on, suddenly I'm aware of that. So that instead of resistance running me ragged in a futile pursuit of some time and place to come when I'll be free, the very onset of that resistance, which is inescapable, it's part of this level of consciousness. What is passive naturally resists what is active. what we call ourselves, our past, is always going to naturally, in quotes, resist anything active, anything timeless that comes in to show that this nature, these thoughts, these feelings, they don't serve me anymore. They may have served me back then. They don't serve me now. How do I know they don't serve me now? Because they're the source of my suffering, not what I blame for revealing him. So if I understand that this resistance that now gives rise to a futile action, this resistance I'm feeling gives rise to a futile action, because the action that resistance gives rise to is the continuation of that nature. The action that resistance gives rise to is not the end of that nature. It is the reincarnation of it in a time to come, which is where it lives. So when resistance to life's conditions, when they are unconscious, what can happen to me? What can possibly happen to me as long as I am captured by, meaning identified with, any negative reaction I have? What's the only thing that can happen? Reaction gives rise to action. The action is not freeing me from the resistance. The action is the continuation of that resistance, and so on and so forth, seemingly forever. This is why resistance is futile. For those Trekkies out there, Star Trek, they touched on something quite true. Resistance is futile. If resistance had any power to change what brings it up, would not this world, would not you have found a happiness that lasts? Thinking about happiness is not happiness. Thinking about a time to come when you'll be free and experiencing temporarily the consolation of those thoughts is not freedom. It's secret slavery. It's secretly holding you captive to the sense of self derived from whatever that mind is holding up. And why does my mind have to imagine anything at all about a time to come when I'll get rid of this unhappiness or I'll find bigger, better happiness? Why? If happiness is a God-given, God did not create the spirit of fear. If God didn't create the spirit of fear, then what is the spirit of fear? And the answer is this spirit of fear and the unhappiness that dwells with it comes out of an unconscious nature having imagined what will free it at some other point when it was resisting what it thought took its freedom away. Then it imagines a new freedom. And what do you get? Identification, attachment, and dependency on something that could no more free you than clamping handcuffs on your hands would liberate you. When our resistance can be seen consciously as futile, then it is that seeing itself that is the transforming action. When our resistance can be seen in the moment, consciously, as I've described to you, as being the continuation of the unhappiness, not the cancellation of it, in that same moment, the action born of that revelation is the transformation. Why? Because it spells the end of my attachment and identification with that nature. So that the negation isn't this trying to negate that. The negation is the total negation of an unconscious nature. Whoever loses their life will find it. I'm talking to you about what it takes to lose one's life in order to find real life. First, we have to see the futility of living from a life that is futile. And it's so hard to do because all I know is the way it makes me feel. And I love this feeling when you're right, and I hate this feeling when you're wrong. And when you or they or them is wrong, up comes resistance. And then we look for solutions in the resistance that we feel. Imagine we look for a solution to our unhappiness in the resistance we feel to someone or something in that moment, because we cannot see that the resistance that we're experiencing in that moment is simply the continuation of an action we took before, where maybe I wasn't happy with you, I'll go find someone else. And I'm happy when I find someone else until someone else becomes just like who I thought I left in order to be happy. You have to see this in your own life. I can sit and spell out examples till the cows come home. It's not going to change anything until we realize that the transformation isn't in the renewal of a sense of self that seeks renewal through whatever it imagines. The real transformation is the rebirth of self, when it is seen and understood that this old nature has no say and cannot have a say in my life. And as long as it does, I will serve it. You can't serve two masters. You'll love one, despise the other. And it's this need. I'll speak from I could have no more imagined or created what it is that I'm explaining to you about what has been given to me to see, then I could imagine what it's like to walk on some distant star in a far-off galaxy. We are brought to what is real, which is beyond imagination, by ultimately seeing that what we suffer from and resist is our attachment and identification with what, and we didn't even imagine it. We were given to imagine. And try to see the flip side of this with me. Some of us were told, imagine this, and we went out and imagined it, and we got it. Some of us were never in a place where it was possible to imagine something, and yet we were still imbued with the idea that this happiness was due us, but life denied us this happiness, so our only response to a life that denies us happiness is to be unhappy with life and blame it and blame others. Instead of seeing the whole mess, a pit of snakes, quite literally, the Medusa's head, the endless labyrinth. All of those are metaphors for an unconscious nature that instead of recognizing that what is required of it isn't its continuation and yet some form of how it will reconcile the unhappiness it has, it comes in the negation of itself that it cannot bring to itself. See it with me? Did you ever reach a point where you just, maybe an addict of some kind, you still hungered, you still thirst, you still wanted to do it, but something made it so clear that you can't do that? Well, if that's all I wanted to do, what in the name of God is showing me that this resistance is futile? What's showing me that I can no longer be that way? It can't be me showing me that. It has to be the light in the darkness that comprehends it not. And that light shows the darkness itself. That light helps that darkness understand what it's doing to itself. And as it becomes increasingly transfigured, as it enters into another order of itself, rising up the scale of creation, if you will, then it begins to be given what it needs to die to itself, which it cannot do by itself. It can only agree to the conditions that make it evident that's the solution to the unhappiness. This path that I'm describing to you, you can only come upon it as you agree to walk as best you can in the light of the truth that you understand. You can't bring the truth to you any more than you can bring the air or the sunlight to you. You can't bring revelations to yourself any more than you could have escaped before you knew you had to the addiction or the problem, the pain that you were in. And that path that leads to this negation is filled with missteps and all kinds of suffering. Because why? Because all I know to do when I'm unhappy is to not want what that unhappiness blames. I have no other path. And I stay captive of that resistance because I don't realize that this resistance that I'm filled with that is giving rise, that reaction, to another action, that it goes nowhere, something has to come and help me see that. And it does come. That living light comes to those who are tired of explaining to themselves why they keep walking into themselves in this darkness. So it's not the negation of life. It's not trying to bring an end to that unhappy relationship by canceling it through an imagined time to come when you'll be in a better relationship. That's a fool's game. It never ends. But rather, it's the negation of the whole activity of that unconscious nature. Because we have given ourselves permission, we have brought ourselves to a place where we can start to see it. Who would what's the definition of insanity? To keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result. So when we feel this conflict and the subsequent unhappiness that comes out of it, to recognize there can be no real reconciliation, no real solution to that suffering that involves anything to do with trying to escape it by hook or crook. So that I wish that that cup would pass from my lips, that this conflict I'm in, this sense of captivity, this unhappiness that's unrelenting, that I seem to escape but then comes back, that now I understand there can be no real transformation as long as I am listening to anything telling me what to do about it. My awareness of what my resistance has done and what it is doing to me in the moment. So difficult to explain what the most part of us doesn't want to see. See it with me. I'm resisting some news I just got. I'm resisting your behavior. This resistance, because it is tied to, it is inseparable from its action, this resistance comes with an action. And the action is what? The action is to identify with, imagine, in some way, come up with a plan that as it becomes part of the way I'm thinking, I begin to feel a little bit at peace, because it won't be this way when I fix you. It won't be this way when I get there. It won't be this way when I change everything. So what I'm experiencing in that moment is simply an opposite of what I don't want to experience. And instead of identifying with the experience I hope for, I must do the unimaginable work of recognizing, again, as St. Paul said, who hopes in things seen? Our hopes must be in things unseen. But how can I hope in something unseen? I can't. I have to live with the fact that my hope to escape my unhappiness is useless, because it is given to me by a useless nature that has been using my life to serve its own ends for millennia. Then you start to understand something. And it isn't just in the Christian tradition. You start to understand something of the nature of the real crucifixion. It is the death of one nature, consciously selected, agreed to, so that in its passing, a rebirth can take place and something new can come out of it. And that's exactly what happens. New possibilities come when you see the impossibility of letting resistance guide your life. New possibilities come when you stop agreeing to identify with this resistance and what it points to. What are the new possibilities that come out of it? The new possibilities that come out of it is that suddenly you can see that nature. You're not identified with it anymore. You're in a new interior place. The light of that life shows you what that resistance is doing to you in the moment it's doing it to you. When we have resistance and we identify with it, we're suffering. We don't know we're suffering when we're full of resistance, because resistance is looking away from the cause of itself and experiencing what it calls happiness in a time to come. If you would, if you will, if you wish, see that when you are resisting something and you don't allow that consciousness to point to what will free you in a time to come, if you just stay with the awareness of the resistance, in the awareness of that resistance, you'll understand the pain you're in that moment cannot be escaped in a time to come. It must be transcended. It must be transformed on the spot. And that's exactly what this light does. It transforms on the spot your relationship to that unconscious nature, because it reveals to you the content, the character of that unconscious nature. As that character, the quality of that unconscious nature responsible for that resistance becomes clear, out of that clarity, new possibilities appear. Not the possibilities, the binary possibilities that resistance produces, but the revelation of a completely different order of self. The possibility of a new order of your own being is laid out right in front of your new eyes. And then you have new actions that can be taken that aren't the continuation of this action, reaction, reaction, action, but that come from a world above that binary unconscious level. And that by you being aware and related to those, you are lifted out and above that unhappiness. And then you begin to abide where you always have happiness. Not happiness like, oh, I love this, oh, I love that, oh, I can't wait to go here. Not happiness, oh, I'm going to go eat that. Happiness that doesn't require an opposite to sustain itself. It is your relationship with the divine that you are invited to every time you run into what happens when you have decided that happiness lies somewhere outside of yourself. It does not. Resistance seems to prove that happiness is outside of you, because resistance points to the source of the unhappiness. It is an interior work. Make it that. Use your resistance. Don't serve it. Recognize that nothing that you resist is going to change what you're resisting, because what you're resisting doesn't exist without that resistance. They are simultaneously, mutually dependent. The more clearly you see that, the nearer you are to something that thought will never embrace or know. The nearer you are to being a human being who is no longer a pain and a punishment to those around you, because you are related to and living from an innocence. An innocence that doesn't have to look for something to validate it, but an innocence that in its purity understands the perfection of everything that brought it to that purity, and that can no longer and never will fight again with the revelation of what is in the dark. Resistance. Let's take a break. We'll come back and have a dialogue.
All right, thank you, Guy. And yes, now is a good time to stand up and stretch and refresh your beverage. And we're going to have just a few moments here while we wait. There you go. Here's mine, water. Yeah, I'll go ahead and give a few announcements just to sort of fill the time a little bit while you guys all take a break. It sounded like you were slurping on that for a second.
No, I was just stirring it.
Okay, gotcha.
I won't do it again.
Let's see. So we're about to go into a Q&A with Guy. We'll have about 30 minutes for that. So if you're here on GoToWebinar, of course, you know that you can raise your hand if you wish to speak directly with Guy. and I will unmute you on our end. You'll unmute on your end, and you'll be able to talk with him if you like. You can also send a comment in the question box, and I will read it to Guy in the group. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, just send a note there in the comment area, and I am going to cycle around and try to pick those up. And let's see, I also just want to let you know, if you don't know already, that if you'd like to get reminders about this class right before it starts, you can actually sign up for text reminders. So you can go to guyfinley.org/reminder, and that will automatically redirect you to a page where you can enter your telephone number, and you'll get a notice every time we start one of these live classes with Guy on Sunday, and also before his Insight Timer class on Saturdays. So you can cancel that anytime, by the way, opt out of it. So we don't send anything to that number other than the reminder. So that's just a nice way to get a quick notice, guyfinley.org/reminder. And then I just want to let you know, well, first of all, if you are getting something, finding something valuable from this work, please consider supporting us. And thank you to all who have sent us donations and continue to donate to nonprofit Life of Learning Foundation. We certainly appreciate the support, and it allows us to put these free classes out there. And if you were to go to our website, you would see that there's so much free material. I'm just going to make a quick note to you, Eric. Can you stop that screen and start it again? It's not showing the correct screen. There you go. Perfect. Yeah, so we do our best to get these ideas as far out into the world as we can. And when we're able to, we like to give you a little something in return for your donation. And right now we have a special promotion going on where if you make a donation of $10 or more, you will receive instant access to a course on letting go, everything you need to know about letting go. And it's a great course. It actually, there are a couple of things in it. There's, it started off with just a 5-part course that Guy recorded in the studio. It's really nice. It's got a transcript that goes with it. They're very short audio files, and so it's a nice thing to download to your phone or your computer and listen to those offline at any time. But we also added to it a webinar series, a special webinar series that Guy did a few years back. Was during one of our Weekend of Wisdoms. It was called Letting Go, the Unlimited Power of Surrender. And so you'll find those 3 talks up there with that e-course as well. And you can go to guyfinley.org/special, and that will tell you a little bit more about the package and also have the buttons for making a donation. So again, we appreciate your support, and all donations are tax deductible in the US. All right, so now is the time, everyone. Again, if you want to speak with Guy and you're on GoToWebinar, just raise your hand or send a comment or question, and I'll read it to him. And you can go ahead also on Facebook or YouTube and send your notes there. In fact, I see one on there right now, but I think we're going to start off with Gloria and see what she has to say. Hi, Gloria, you're unmuted.
Hi, good morning, Kate. Good morning, Guy.
Good morning.
This talk was so relevant to experience I had yesterday, and talking about testing that resistance. I had parked my car in a shady spot with the window down for my dog. I time it 10 minutes to go into the store and come back to make sure he's okay. And lo and behold, a woman was standing out there looking at me. She goes, is that your car and your dog? And I go, well, absolutely, that is. And she goes, would you leave a child in a car like that? And I said, I was gone in less than 10 minutes. And she goes, well, I called the police on you. I got your driver's license number, and she just went on. And I said, everything is fine. I just got into my car and took off, and I didn't react to that guy. But when I got into my car and left, I was talking to my dog and saying how mean that was. Ziggy, I would never do that to you. So I did have a form of reaction, but indirectly, but not directly, because I knew that directly would solve the issue, because Christ said, turn the other cheek. Now I understand what he meant now when he says, turn the other cheek.
Yes.
So I did experience that, but my question to you is this: because that incident, and like I was really happy that day, and that kind of ruined my day too, as well. And then it took a while to release it, then I was fine. But did that incident come up because of something that was like reincarnated, maybe something other resistance, and the divine was testing me to refine me even further, to develop that in myself?
The question, Gloria, is so broad as to virtually be impossible to answer, even if I was to write 50 volumes on the question. Let's just say, so that we can get a sense of what you're asking related to the material I presented and the incident that brings it to mind and for us to discuss. Let's just say that there is no creation that is complete. Everything in creation, from the most microscopic, whatever it might be, to a universe itself, relies upon something else to ensure that it goes through changes and that those changes reflect the bigger, broader life that might be acting on those individual creatures or qualities. And that if we understood that creation on one hand is an unfinished business. If this world was a finished business, then we would have found in this world what frees us. This world itself is unfinished business. It is always being recreated. And it is recreated by forces that transcend the forces of the planet itself, so that we, as a planet, swim around in a universe of energy, seen and unseen, and they are never not acting on what requires those actions so that they can be transformed, purified, and perfected accordingly in that moment. That's a big picture. Now, if that's true as above, so below. You, I, we are unfinished business, Gloria. We are made in the image of God, and that living spark that is the image of God is perfect, but it is seeded into an imperfect creation. This imperfect creation is always being acted on by what is perfect, not so that it can judge itself or think about its imperfection, but so that it can gradually recognize it's not up to you to perfect yourself. It's up to you to allow what is perfect to reveal that which is temporarily imperfect. What is temporarily imperfect? That which is incomplete. And then we start. I was thinking, even before you asked this question, I was going to tell all of you, do you think Michelangelo was happy with the Mona Lisa when he painted it? I can tell you he wasn't. And the reason he wasn't, and the reason that no one, in quotes, is finally happy with creation that they make, is because we're able to see and take into ourselves these energies that are perfect in their movement and what they intuit as a possibility. But when these energies are brought into a physical form, by the fact that they become something created instead of creative energies, they're incomplete. So that in this instance, I was thinking about myself. I wanted so badly to present today the immensity of this possibility of recognizing that we are always and forever caught up in this unconscious nature that believes it can complete itself. And that when it accomplishes what it imagines completes itself and it's happy, then the conditions that it thought it controlled change because it can't control them, and now it's unhappy. And now it's resisting again. So the resistance is the evidence of unfinished business. But it's an unfinished business that on one hand must be constantly attended to so that we die to what has come from the past so that it can be perfected by the presence of God. And at the same time, we wouldn't even know that it was imperfect if it weren't for the presence of God revealing through that nature the possibility of a perfection. So that we give up this idea of trying to figure out this lesson or that lesson because we recognize the futility of trying to get a hold of something that then we can say, I understand. Understanding is a living thing. It's not what I bring into the moment with me. There's nothing more useless than bringing in what I understand into the moment with me. Unless what I bring into the moment with me, that understanding can see itself as incomplete, as being not finished. Then the revelation of that imperfection. What's that passage? Again, in my weakness is thy strength made perfect. So you start to see this much broader world, Gloria, that you are invited into, and that every moment of life, you don't need somebody to come along and tell you, by the way, what you know already probably shouldn't have done. We know these things, but we do them anyway. We don't do the good we would because we're on our way to a better, to something we want. And so our life is like this anchor we drag behind us. But instead of the anchor we drag behind us, it can be a new understanding that anchors us in this divine revelation that is rebirth and freedom itself. Does that connect, Gloria?
Yes, and if it wasn't for this work, I wouldn't have looked at it in the way that I did in that moment.
For sure. 100%. 100%.
I appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you, Gloria.
It's just amazing. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Bye.
All right, thank you, Gloria. Guy, I'm going to read a question. Before I do, just a reminder to those of you on GoToWebinar that this is your chance to talk with Guy if you wish. Just go ahead and raise your hand, click or tap the hand icon there, and I'll bring you into the discussion. Here is a question that came in from Susanna. How do we burn the resistance? How long do we hang on the cross before we are resurrected?
Hi, Susanna. First, Susanna, everything that I was just explaining to Gloria connects to your question. What you're asking me is, how long do I have to go through this before I don't have to go through this anymore? It's quite common, Gloria, Susanna. Because in our mind, I say, well, all right, you know what, within reason, I'll agree to this pain. Because if I agree to it and then try to go through it, then I'll be free of pain. And that's not how it works at all. Because that mindset holds in it this illusion that you are somehow other than the pain you're in that moment. And if I did anything today, I helped us see that this unconscious nature is the source of the pain it is always trying to escape through the resistance it feels, the reactions it follows, the new world it intends to build for itself. It can't escape itself. I don't know how else to say this, I suppose. Christ, any true teacher, any human being who has ever awakened to some extent, understands in that moment that you're describing as something that you will agree to in order to get to something else. That man or woman does not agree to something to get to something else. That man or woman, and I'll say it in the first person, understands, I am the resurrection. I have never not been with the Father. I have never not been the sacrificial lamb. I have never been that which isn't being transformed and reborn. That's what awakening leads to. Not wanting to bring an end to the crucifixion of the moment, to the pain of the unwanted situation. Because that awareness that lives in that darkness, that light that dwells there, that the darkness doesn't know, Susanna, it knows that situation, that process, isn't just the purification of all that has come before. It is the proof that in that very nature that doesn't want to go through what it is asked to go through, it is the proof by revelation that there is in fact something that will glorify that light, glorify God as it agrees to go through that crucifixion. It's almost unfathomable for our mind that our nature is resurrection. That just as Christ said he is in the Father, so are we, and so are we in that Christ. So are we in that light. So are we in that Logos, that vast, timeless intelligence, the source of love. And I am in a relationship with what is never not being resurrected. And in the endless resurrection, which requires the death of what came before, the realization of a relationship with something that can be gained in no other way. You'll have to think about that, I think, Susanna. Let's go on, Kate.
All right, I just sent you a question that came in from Peter watching on YouTube. And again, folks, we have just a little bit more time, 10, 15 minutes. So if you want to speak with Guy or ask a question, now's the time to do it. Here's Peter's question. Happiness that doesn't require an opposite to sustain itself. Can Guy please throw more light on that? Thanks.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, I'll try in a couple different ways. We can substitute happiness for contentment, for love, peace. In the end, they're all one state, an undivided state, where I am not apart from the world that I'm in. Rather, I'm a participant in its endless revelation. If I'm a participant in the endless revelation of life, then that means there's no me to cling to, hold on to, or hope for something in that revelation, because the revelation is always new. God's life is never not being revealed in time. And the difficulty in time is understanding the timelessness that gives rise to it. In what is already complete, what need have I to cling to anything for the source of that happiness? Then I am one with that completion. I am one with that contentment. Now, said in maybe simpler words, something might strike a chord at some level with all of us. My happiness depends on my finances. Now, I don't think to myself that I'm a greedy person. I don't think to myself that I'm some kind of strange Midas. But if something comes along and threatens my finances, I'm unhappy. I'm anxious. So the source of my happiness becomes the source of my unhappiness. I think my happiness depends upon the way you treat me. And as a rule, you treat me pretty good, so I'm pretty happy. Oh, brother, You cast that glance out of the corner of your eye, you say this passive aggressive comment, and the oh yeah part of my happiness with you is oh no, no you don't. So the happiness that I call happiness is really my identification with a static quality of being connected to what I expect and hope for and cling to. And nothing that we cling to can ever be the source of happiness, because by the very nature of having to cling to something proves we're apart from it. Happiness is the end of separation, Peter. Not joining ourselves to something that momentarily grants us the happiness we've imagined it will. On we go, Katie.
All right, well, I think we can wrap it up for today. No more hands, no more questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Good for
All right. What else can we do?
nothing. That's it.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And as I mentioned earlier, the recording, the free replay for this class will go up on GoToWebinar, Facebook, and YouTube afterwards. So do go back and check that out if you wish. Eric just put up a little reminder about our donation promo special. If you go to guyfinley.org/special and make a donation of $10 or more, you'll receive instant access to our Letting Go e-course. So again, thank you for your support. And just a reminder about our schedule. We have several different times that we meet during the week, different types of classes. We have study groups. We have classic talks that are broadcast, oldie but goodie talks by Guy. We've got the live talks on the weekends. So go to guyfinley.org/events and you will see everything that you can participate in during the week. And of course, if you're not on our newsletter, you can go to guyfinley.org/newsletter and sign up, and you will also get notifications. I think that's it, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today.